Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I've been driving trucks for 15 years, and in all that time I thought I had seen everything. I've driven through blizzards, hurricanes, riots, even a few wildfires. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw that night. It started like any other long haul. I had a full load of refrigerated goods and was running an overnight route through the Midwest. The roads were quiet, just the occasional car or another rig passing by. I had the radio on low, sipping my coffee, keeping my eyes on the empty stretch of highway ahead. That's when I saw him. A man was standing on the shoulder of the road waving both arms. Normally, I wouldn't stop for a hitchhiker, but something about him made me hesitate. His clothes were torn, and he looked frantic, like he had been running for miles. I slowed down, pulling onto the side of the road, and rolled down my window. "You gotta help me," he gasped, his face pale and drenched in sweat. "They're coming. He stopped mid-sentence, looking back over his shoulder toward the dark tree line. I glanced in the mirrors, but I didn't see anything. "Who's coming?" I asked. "They're not." "Right," he muttered, shaking his head. "They don't stop. They don't." A noise cut him off. Something rustling in the woods. It wasn't the sound of a single person walking through leaves. It was more, like a crowd moving together. Heavy footsteps crunching the ground. The man's breathing turned erratic, and before I could react, he grabbed the passenger side door handle and yanked it open. "Drive!" he shouted, climbing in. Now, I'm not the kind of guy to take orders from a stranger, but something about his voice, it was pure panic. I shoved the truck into gear and floored it. As we pulled away, I glanced in the side mirror. That's when I saw them. A group of people, maybe a dozen or more, emerged from the trees. But they weren't just walking. They were sprinting. And something about the way they moved. It was all wrong. Their arms flailed unnaturally. Their heads twitched, and their eyes. Those eyes were lifeless, empty, but locked onto us like predators spotting prey. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The man was hyperventilating, holding his head in his hands. It's not normal. They don't feel pain. They don't stop. I saw my neighbor get..." He cut himself off, swallowing hard. "They're sick, or infected. I don't know, man, but I saw them take bullets and keep coming. And if they catch you..." I didn't need him to finish that sentence. We drove in silence for a while, the hum of the engine the only sound in the cab. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see those things still chasing us, but we had put enough distance between us. Finally, I exhaled. "All right, let's start from the beginning. Who are you?" He took a shaky breath. "Ryan. My name's Ryan. I was in a gas station when it all started. People just went crazy. Biting, clawing, attacking anyone nearby. The cops showed up and He rubbed his temples. "They shot some of them. But the ones they shot got back up. They didn't even flinch." I shook my head. "That's not possible." Ryan gave a hollow laugh. "Yeah? That's what I thought too." I checked the fuel gauge, half a tank left. "We need to find a safe place," I said. "A truck stop or something. Figure out what the hell is happening." Ryan looked out the window, his fingers tapping nervously on his knee. "I don't think there's any safe place anymore." I didn't like the way he said that. A few miles later, we spotted a sign. "Rest area, 2 miles." It wasn't ideal, but I needed a break to think. I turned off the highway and pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. A single sedan was parked near the vending machines, its interior dark. The place looked deserted. "Stay here," I told Ryan, grabbing my flashlight. "You sure about that?" he asked, gripping the door handle like he was ready to bolt. I didn't answer. I stepped out, the cool night air hitting my skin, and scanned the area. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. I walked toward the restrooms, checking for any signs of movement. The door was slightly open. My gut told me to turn around, get back in the truck and drive, but I had to be sure. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. Something rotten, something wrong. Then I saw it. Bloody handprints smeared across the tiled walls. And slumped against the sinks was a man, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, his throat. A sound behind me. I turned just in time to see a figure lurching out of the stall. A man. No, not a man anymore. His skin was gray, his mouth smeared with something dark, and his eyes, those same lifeless, predatory eyes I had seen on the road. I took a step back, heart hammering. Then he lunged. I didn't have time to think, just react. The thing came at me fast, faster than anyone with a broken, twisted body had any right to. I stumbled back, barely dodging as it lunged, its teeth snapping shut with a sickening click right where my neck had been a second ago. My back hit the wall, and my flashlight slipped from my fingers, clattering to the tile and spinning wildly, its beam slicing across the blood-streaked walls. The creature turned its head toward me in that jerky, unnatural way, like a puppet with its strings pulled too tight. I kicked out, my boot connecting with its chest, and it staggered back, but it didn't fall. It didn't even seem hurt. It came at me again, arms outstretched, fingers clawing the air. I reached blindly behind me and my hand closed around something cold and heavy, a metal trash can. I swung it with everything I had. The can smashed into the creature's head with a crack, sending it stumbling sideways into the sinks. But still, it didn't go down. It just kept coming. I wasn't sticking around to see how many hits it could take. I bolted for the door. It came after me, faster than I expected, and I could hear its ragged, wheezing breath right behind me. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. I hit the door with my shoulder, crashing through it and out into the night. "Get in the truck!" I shouted. Ryan was already halfway out of the cab, eyes wide when he saw me, and the thing chasing me. He didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled back inside as I sprinted toward the rig. The creature was right behind me. I could hear its feet slapping against the pavement, feel its fingers brush against the back of my jacket. I threw myself into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut, just as the thing hit the side of the truck with a thud. It clawed at the window, its face pressed against the glass. Pale, blood-smeared, eyes burning with empty, mindless rage. "Drive, man, drive," Ryan shouted. I didn't argue. I fired up the engine and floored it. The thing kept pace for a few terrifying seconds before finally falling behind, disappearing into the dark. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the rumble of the engine and my own ragged breathing. "What was that?" Ryan finally whispered. "You tell me," I said, hands trembling on the wheel. We drove in silence for a while after that, the night swallowing us up. The highway stretched out ahead, empty and endless, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. And then we saw the fire. It was just over the next hill, a glow on the horizon, flickering orange and red. As we got closer, I realized it wasn't just one fire. It was a whole town. The buildings were burning, smoke rising into the night sky. Cars were crashed and overturned on the side of the road. Figures moved through the streets, some running, some staggering. Ryan sat forward, staring out the windshield. "It's everywhere," he whispered. I didn't answer. I just kept driving. As we passed a small roadside gas station, I saw a family outside, a man, a woman, and a little girl, waving their arms, screaming for help, but behind them, The others were coming. Too many. "We can't stop," I said, my voice cold and flat. Ryan looked at me like I was a monster. "We can't just leave them. If we stop, we die." He opened his mouth to argue, but then the creatures reached the family. I stared straight ahead and kept driving. Neither of us spoke after that. We kept moving through the night, the fires and screams fading behind us. Every so often, we'd see more figures on the side of the road, some alive, some not. I didn't stop for any of them. And then the radio crackled. It was faint at first, just static, but then a voice broke through. "If anyone can hear this, safety, military, checkpoint." I grabbed the receiver. "Hello? Hello, this is truck 1097, I hear you. Where's the checkpoint?" More static, then, "Route 18, 7 miles, hurry." The radio cut out again. "Route 18's not far," I said, hope flaring in my chest for the first time. "If there's a military checkpoint, we'll be safe." "Unless it's already gone," Ryan muttered. I didn't want to think about that. We found Route 18 and turned onto it, and almost immediately we hit traffic. Cars were lined up, stretching ahead as far as I could see, their red taillights glowing in the darkness. People were getting out, yelling, arguing, trying to figure out what was happening. "We're sitting ducks here," Ryan said, his eyes scanning the woods on either side of the road. "We need to get off the highway." "I'm not ditching the truck," I said. "It's our best chance." Then, somewhere up ahead, someone screamed. The crowd started to scatter, and from the trees, they came. The same twisted, broken figures I'd seen before, too fast, too relentless, too wrong. "We're not gonna make it," Ryan whispered. "Yes, we are," I said. I slammed the horn, hoping to clear a path, but the crowd wasn't moving. They were too panicked, too disorganized. The creatures were getting closer. "Hold on," I said. Then I hit the gas. The truck surged forward, and people finally started to get out of the way. I didn't want to think about the ones who didn't move fast enough. I just kept my eyes on the road, on the military lights I could see flashing in the distance. We were so close. But the creatures were closer, and they were faster than I ever thought possible. The truck roared down the highway, engine screaming as I pushed it harder than I ever had before. The road ahead was a nightmare. People running in every direction, cars abandoned and wrecked, and those things surging forward like a tidal wave of teeth and claws. "Faster, man! They're right behind us!" Ryan shouted, his voice cracking. "I'm going as fast as I can," I barked back, white-knuckling the wheel. In the mirrors, I saw them closing in, dozens of them, maybe more. Their faces were twisted, their bodies jerking and lurching, but they ran with an inhuman speed. It didn't matter how broken they looked, they never slowed down. They never stopped. Up ahead, the military checkpoint finally came into view. A blockade of Humvees and barricades lit by floodlights. Soldiers were shouting orders, motioning for vehicles to move through. A few were already opening fire into the trees at something I couldn't see yet. "We're gonna make it," I said, heart pounding. "Hold on." The truck slammed through the last stretch of traffic, bouncing over the shoulder and onto the dirt, bypassing the gridlocked cars. People waved their arms, screaming for help, but I couldn't stop. Not now. Not with those things right behind us. Then, as we closed in on the checkpoint, I saw the soldiers' expressions shift. They weren't looking at us anymore. They were looking behind us. "Open fire!" someone shouted. The gunfire erupted in a deafening roar. Bullets tore through the night, cutting down the first wave of creatures, but there were too many. They kept coming, vaulting over cars, climbing over each other just to get closer. "Go, go, go!" Ryan screamed. I barreled toward the checkpoint, and at the last second a soldier waved us through. I barely cleared the barricade before they slammed it shut behind us. The creatures hit the blockade like a flood, slamming into it so hard the metal rattled. Soldiers kept firing, cutting down row after row. But for every one that fell, 3 more took its place. I yanked the truck into a stop and killed the engine, my hands shaking. Ryan was already scrambling out of the cab and I followed close behind. The second my feet hit the ground, someone grabbed my arm. "Move!" a soldier barked, dragging me toward a makeshift command post. "Wait, what's happening? What are those things?" I demanded. "No time, just keep moving." We were herded into a fenced-off area, along with other civilians, maybe 100 of us in total. People were crying, shouting, begging for answers. Over the noise, I spotted an officer speaking with one of his men near the gate. "Sir, we're not going to hold them," the soldier said, panic in his voice. "We need to fall back." "Not until we get more survivors through," the officer snapped. "Hold the line." But even as he said it, I could see the barricade starting to buckle. The creatures were relentless, slamming against it with mindless fury. The gunfire never stopped, but the soldiers were running low on ammo. I could see it in their faces. "We're not safe here," Ryan muttered, his eyes darting around. "This place is gonna fall." I didn't want to believe it, but I knew he was right. The barricade gave its first warning groan, metal bending under the pressure. People started screaming. "We have to get out of here," I said. "Now." "But where do we go?" Ryan asked. I scanned the checkpoint, and that's when I saw it. A military transport truck parked near the edge of the compound. It was big, armored, and, more importantly, it wasn't being guarded. "There," I said, pointing. "If we can get to that." The barricade finally gave. The sound of it crumpling was like thunder, and then the creatures poured through. The soldiers fired desperately, but it wasn't enough. The line broke almost instantly. "Run!" I shouted. The crowd panicked. People surged in every direction, and the creatures were right behind them. I grabbed Ryan's arm and dragged him toward the truck. A soldier ran past us, only to be tackled from behind. I didn't look back. We reached the military vehicle just as the screaming reached a fever pitch. The doors were unlocked. "Get in!" I ordered, scrambling into the driver's seat. Ryan dove in beside me, and I fumbled for the keys. Thank God they were still in the ignition. The engine roared to life. I slammed it into gear and gunned it. We tore through the compound, dodging around soldiers and civilians alike. Creatures lunged at the truck, clawing at the sides, but the armor held. I kept my foot down, eyes locked on the open road ahead. As we broke free of the checkpoint, I risked one last glance in the mirror. The compound was overrun. Fire and chaos and death. The soldiers were gone. The barricades had fallen. And the creatures, they had won. "Where do we go?" Ryan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't have an answer. We drove through the night, the world around us falling apart, towns were burning, roads were choked with wreckage. Every so often we'd pass figures shambling along the highway, or worse, running. Always running. By dawn, we were running low on fuel. "We need to find somewhere safe," Ryan said. "We can't keep driving forever." He was right, but I didn't know if there was any safe place left. Up ahead, I spotted a green highway sign. "Rest stop 1 mile." "Let's check it out," I said. "See if we can find supplies, maybe some answers." Ryan didn't argue. We pulled into the rest stop and I killed the engine. Everything was still and quiet, too quiet. I reached behind the seat and found a crowbar, the only weapon I had. Ryan grabbed a tire iron. "Stay close," I whispered. The building was dark inside. We moved slowly, listening, but there was no sound, no movement, just the eerie stillness of an empty space. Then we found the radio. It was an old CB unit crackling with static, but as I turned the dial, a voice cut through. Evacuation point, safe zone, coordinates. But before we could hear the rest, the static swallowed it. We need that location, Ryan said, adjusting the dial. And that's when we heard the sound behind us. A soft shuffle, a low, rasping breath. We weren't alone. The sound came again, a slow, dragging shuffle. It was faint, almost too quiet to notice. But once you did notice it, you couldn't hear anything else. Ryan froze, his knuckles white around the tire iron. I held my breath, listening. Shuffle, drag, shuffle. It was coming from the far end of the rest stop, somewhere down the dark corridor leading to the bathrooms. Man, we shouldn't be here, Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible. He was right, but we needed that radio. We needed to hear those coordinates. Wherever this safe zone was, it might be our only chance. Stay behind me, I murmured, moving toward the radio. The static crackled in the dim room, filling the silence. I adjusted the dial slowly, trying to get the signal back. My hands were sweating so badly the knob kept slipping between my fingers. Shuffle, drag, thud. The sound was getting closer. Come on, I hissed through clenched teeth, twisting the dial faster. And then, a voice. Repeat, evacuation point at coordinates 41.7. The signal broke up, fizzing into static. I twisted the knob frantically. Thud. Something heavy slammed against the wall behind us. Ryan spun, his breathing ragged. We don't have time for this, he hissed. Just a second. The radio static cleared for an instant. Evacuation point 41.7306 minus 93.6091. Repeat. I didn't hear the rest, because that's when the bathroom door burst open. The thing that staggered out was barely human. Its skin was pale and torn, its mouth blackened and stained. It moved fast, too fast, barreling toward us with that awful, jerky, wrong movement. Move, I shouted. Ryan swung the tire iron, but the thing was faster. It crashed into him, knocking him to the floor. They hit the ground hard and the creature's teeth snapped inches from his face. Get it off me, Ryan screamed. I didn't think, I just reacted. I brought the crowbar down with everything I had. The first hit knocked the thing sideways. The second caved in the side of its head. It stopped moving. Ryan scrambled back, his chest heaving. I think you got it. But then the shuffling started again, from the hallway, from the storage room, from outside, more of them. Time to go, I said, hauling him to his feet. We ran. The rest stop was filling with noise now. Thudding footsteps, rasping breaths, that horrible wet sound of things moving that shouldn't be moving. We burst out the front door just as the first figures appeared in the windows behind us. The military truck was still there, thank God. I climbed into the driver's seat and twisted the key. The engine sputtered and then died. No, I tried again. Nothing. Ryan was pounding on the dashboard. Come on, man, start. The first creature hit the truck, a woman, or what had been a woman. Her face was torn, one arm hanging uselessly at her side, but she ran at the door like a predator. Others followed. The truck's windows rattled as they slammed against it. Their faces pressed against the glass, teeth bared, eyes empty and hungry. Any time now, Ryan shrieked. I twisted the key one last time, and the engine roared to life. I didn't wait, I floored it. The truck tore out of the parking lot, sending creatures scattering. Some clung to the sides, their fingers scrabbling for purchase, but I swerved hard and they fell away. The highway stretched out ahead of us, empty, desolate. Only then did I let myself breathe. Did you get the coordinates? Ryan asked, his voice shaking. Yeah, I said, forcing my hands to stop trembling on the wheel. 1.7306, minus 93.6091. You know what that is? Ryan shook his head. But we don't have a better option. He was right. We drove through the morning, the sun rising over a world that felt completely dead. Towns were burned out husks. Cars sat abandoned on the roads, some splattered with things I didn't want to think about. Every so often I'd see movement in the trees, but nothing followed us. Not yet. We're getting close, Ryan said, checking the GPS we'd found in the truck. Another 20 miles. But as we crested the next hill, my heart sank. The highway ahead was completely blocked. Cars jammed together in a mass of twisted metal and broken glass. There was no way through. We'll have to go on foot, I said, my throat dry. Ryan didn't argue. We grabbed what supplies we could, water, a couple of MREs, and our makeshift weapons. The creatures hadn't shown up yet, but I could feel them out there, watching, waiting. The woods were silent as we walked. Too silent. "Do you hear that?" Ryan whispered. I stopped, listened. Nothing, not even birds. Then, a twig snapped. We turned at the same time, but it was too late. They were already coming. The first one hit Ryan hard, knocking him to the ground. I swung the crowbar, but there were too many. They came from the trees, their eyes empty and their mouths open. "Go!" Ryan screamed. "Run!" I didn't want to leave him, but if I stayed, we both died. So I ran. Branches whipped my face, my breath burning in my lungs. Behind me, I heard Ryan's screams, and then the wet, awful sounds of what came after. But I kept running. The trees thinned ahead, and suddenly I burst into a clearing. And there it was. The evacuation point. A helicopter sat on a makeshift landing pad, soldiers loading up the last of the survivors. They saw me and waved me forward. But behind me, the creatures were coming. "Go!" someone shouted. I sprinted harder than I ever had in my life. I hit the edge of the pad just as the first creature broke into the clearing. Soldiers opened fire, but there were too many. "Get on!" I climbed into the helicopter, my body shaking. The doors slammed shut, and a second later we were airborne. As we lifted off, I looked down. The forest was moving, an endless sea of them, pouring out of the trees. They spread like a disease, covering everything. And Ryan... I closed my eyes. I don't know where we're going now. I don't know if there's anywhere left to go, but I survived the first 12 hours. I just don't know how many more I'll make it through. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.